I'd like to offer some thoughts regarding the letters of the Apostle Paul, and particularly First and now Second Corinthians. While Romans was written at a time where the apostle had not visited that city, yet he is hearing about followers of Christ there. First and Second Corinthians, a very different situation in that Paul had visited the city and evangelized the city. And so there are people there that he knows. He also knows how the church has been, under what circumstances it was established. He also has other correspondence with the church in Corinth that we don't have in our New Testament. First Corinthians makes mention of letters and reports. So we don't know how many of these there are. They are lost to us. Of further interest in the letter is the church in Corinth has apparently challenged the Apostle Paul's apostleship. They are also a very multicultural church. And Paul is addressing the concerns that he has from what reports he has received, and also some questions that they have asked him apparently through correspondence. We don't have the questions, but we do have the responses. And it might be worth noting that the earliest manuscripts that we have, the Greek is all in capitals with no spaces between the words. There is no punctuation either. So in certain parts, when he says, all things are lawful for me, and then says, but all things are beneficial, but not all things are beneficial. And then all things are lawful for me, but I won't be dominated by anything. It's likely that he has heard their argument about all things being lawful, and he is making his response that, well, even if you claim such, not that the claim is valid, but even if you claim such, not everything is beneficial. And then why would you want to be dominated by anything that isn't according to God's law? So we have to use a little bit of interpretation as we read. And be careful as to the apostle's emphasis, not that it's, not be careful of warning, but take note of, because he will write, I say, but it's not of the Lord, but I say. And he will also write, I say, and this is of the Lord. There are degrees to what he offers and how it should be considered, whether it's just his opinion or whether it really is something that is of the Lord. And it's not the Apostle Paul's idea only. So keep note of the different emphases that he has. Some would say that, well, he's writing, and in his response, some of the things are culturally conditioned. Yeah, perhaps, but we have to be careful that we don't put into the letter things that it isn't saying, and as well as what it says, how the apostle gives greater or lesser emphasis to what he is offering. Now, with regard to 2 Corinthians, it would seem perhaps accurate that it is two letters together. That at a certain point, it is more positive at the beginning, but he writes about a harsher letter that he had sent, and then it ends in a much harsher note. And so it's possible that the harsh letter is the second part of what we consider this second letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Now, this is a model. offered by certain academics, and sometimes their models are accurate, sometimes they aren't. I'm inclined to believe that this may be the case. Well, how is it that it isn't separated out? Well, we don't have the originals, we have copies of copies. And the earliest would be on papyrus, which means it would be a scroll, which means when you have a roll of paper or papyrus that is a certain length, you start with the larger work and copy it first, and then fill in the space with the smaller works. As I'm aware, we don't have a copy of 2 Corinthians where there's a clear break. So it might have been at one time 2 letters. It might not have been. We don't really know for sure. But it does seem that there's a change in tone. Now, something further about the letters of the Apostle Paul. Some modern critical scholars will say that some of the later letters are not really his doing, but they're disputed, like Ephesians. And, well, the themes are different, the vocabulary is different, what's being addressed is different. A really good modern scholar had said, well, Romans is very different from 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and yet nobody disputes Romans or 1st and 2nd Corinthians being the works of the Apostle Paul. Over the course of a ministry that probably lasted over 20 years, maybe 30 years, writing at different times, to different places with different issues, it is quite possible that the same author would write 2 works that seem very different from one another. We see this in our modern writers. Why we shouldn't see such in the ancient writers, nobody is willing to examine. So I don't think it's helpful to say, well, these letters of the Apostle Paul, some of them aren't really the Apostle Paul because of stylistic differences. Yeah, be careful of literary critics, because they are often writing things for their own notoriety, and they really cannot possibly know what is in the writer's mind. We have examples of this even with fairly modern works where the critic has said, or different critics have said numerous things, and the writer is still living to be able to dispute it. So we have to be careful many centuries, even millennia after, when we have scholars that are claiming by their authority things that, well, it might be that they are claiming such in part because they know that what they'll say will get noticed and published and give them greater fame because they're saying things that no one else would claim. Sometimes, well, we know that the news is often driven by what gets attention to sell advertising. Sometimes scholarship is driven by things that we don't have the privilege of knowing what's behind what the scholar is saying and why and who's paying who. So, yeah, be careful. And when we do critical examination, be careful of what critics have to say. And yet, these things, these writings, have been authoritative for the church down through the ages. So, if they've been authoritative down through the ages and it has worked, don't be so easily to dismiss them by what some modern critic has to say. Thank you very much.